Subject of my book, I really love that. Because there's few things I love talking about more than Tom. Now, Tom was a hopeful guy. He was in the music industry. And often I think of that line in The Godfather 2, when they go, "This is the business we've chosen." It applies to the music business too. You know what you're getting into when you get into it, and Tom knew. It's not an easy business to be in, but it was the only place for Tom Petty to be, and he made it work. But he remained hopeful even during tough times, and there's many examples of this. When he first came to Los Angeles, he stayed. First they stayed at what he called a hooker's motel, the Hollywood Queen there on Sunset Boulevard, but not on the good part of Sunset Boulevard, far east of there. And but then, pretty quickly on, after they got the deal, he stayed in an apartment they gave him in Encino. But later, he lived up in the hills of Encino, where it's nicer, but he stayed right on the freeway. So loud that this place, backed up to the freeway, so it was just a huge roar, which drove most people just crazy. But being Tom Petty, he loved the symbolic feeling of it. Here he was in California, and he said it reminded him of the ocean. Here, this highway in the distance, well, very close actually, and it reminded him of waves crashing. And as you guys probably know, that came into a song of his, but he switched it to the 441. Isn't that very near here, the 441? Yeah, it's just over there, right? It was kind of cold that night. She stood alone on her balcony. She could hear the cars roll by out on 441, like waves crashing in the beach. She was an American girl raised on promises. And she couldn't help but thinking there was a little more to life somewhere else. That's Tom. He's right on the freeway when most people would be going nutty, and he'd hear the ocean and turn it into a song. No matter if he was happy, like he was a lot of the time, especially towards the last years of his life, or if he was going through tough times, which happened a lot for different reasons and many different times. He wrote great songs, and his saddest times, he wrote songs like Echo. He wrote beautiful songs of love called Angel Dream. When he first met Dana, he dreamt of her that night. I dreamed her face, and that was perfectly true. When he wrote a love song, it was real. As you guys know, he felt it from his heart, and that's what touches us always in his songs, and will forever. Those are timeless songs, and that's the ultimate achievement of a songwriter, to write something that lasts. If you write one song that the whole world knows, that's huge. You wrote that? Some people that no one knows their name, but they know that song. Many examples. Tom, as you might know, has done that many, many, many times. He has so many songs that the whole world knows, in all ages, all kinds of people. We did our book in 2005, and since then, it got reviews, and now there's a thing called Goodreads where readers can review books. And so, of course, being a self-obsessed author, I have to go and check those out. Who wouldn't, And I must say that people loved it, generally. They loved this chance to be with Tom, because it's Tom in his own words. And that's what he was about. It's honest. I wasn't going to rewrite him or try to put in my own words his story. It was Tom in his own words, mostly talking about songs and music. That was the initial idea. But there was one criticism I found kind of funny that came up once in a while, and several. They said, if Zollo's guilty of anything in this book, it's too much gushing. He seemed to be, too hyperbolic in his praise of Tom. As if I might have been doing it for the typical reason, just to butter someone up so you get good stuff. But in truth, I'm a songwriter, and I have great reverence, for amazing songwriters. And I'm a fan. And these songs are, to me, miracle songs. So many of these songs, like I know for all of you, they mean so much to me. We live in these songs. We make sense out of our life with these songs. We think of those lines. So many of them. I think of every day. Most things I worry about never happen anyway. Can there be a more truer line for living in modern times than that? Sometimes they do happen, those things. But the truth is, that wasn't fake gushing. That was real, because I'm in awe. And he knew that, and that's what was our initial bond. When I first interviewed him in 1994, Wildflowers was about to come out. And so I got the advance. Mary Clouser sent it without knowing anything. I didn't know there'd be such a bounty of songs. I was already just so amazed by the Full Moon Fever and what came out there, and that change in sound, and just this sense of joy that he seemed to be reaching, and a sense of beautiful simplicity, where he was able just to get to the essence and the core of a song, but always so melodic and so heartfelt. I thought after that, it couldn't be much better than that. Usually people do something that great and they go downhill. But then we get Wildflowers, and so many songs, and every kind of song, you know, from the most tender, Wildflowers, the perfect name for that album, Wildflowers that grow on their own, but it's beautiful with just a little gentle guidance from the creator. Some of the songs, like Wildflowers, Tom said he didn't have to work on very much. They came out. And others he did work on. A song which you wouldn't think maybe you worked on so long, like You Wreck Me. That was written to Mike Campbell's track. You know, Mike would give Tom many tracks, 20, 30, and Tom would find one, and then he'd work on it for a long time and get it right. And You Wreck Me, he said he had it, but he had You Rock Me for almost a year. And he just knew that's close, but it's not right. And he had that sense, like that is close, but he didn't settle. Tom never settles. He's like, that could be better, even if it takes a year. And then he got You Wreck Me, and one word like that changed the whole song. The song is such a small form that any tiny change like that is momentous. But it took him a year. And also when you think about that song, Mike gave him those chords. And Tom doesn't sing right on the chord changes like you would normally do. He sings between those chord changes. He inserts the melody in a place that it works perfectly, but it's not normal and it's not expected, and yet it's just great. And that was the essence of who he was. He always made things a little different, so they always were appealing, but always so melodically and harmonically beautiful to hear. So that gushing was real. So the first time I interviewed him on Wildflowers, like I do, so I've been interviewing the great songwriters of our time for years. I did a book called Songwriters on Songwriting with a lot of the interviews, and I had Paul Simon and Bob Dylan, and Tom Petty's in that book as well. And my son said, you should mention that book, Dad. You know, they like Tom Petty, let him know. That's called Songwriters on Songwriting. And I did the sequel. And it's great for me to talk to songwriters because you want to find out how do great songwriters write their songs. How did Tom Petty, he looks like a regular human, how did he write all those? And still, you know, just keep doing it. How did he sustain it? After he did it for 40 years. You think of the Beatles, what they did, it was 10 years. He did it 4 times more than that, and he sustained the passion and the love. And he would be the first person to say he did it because he loved it. There's nothing he loved more except his children and Dana, certainly, his wife. You know, there was love, that kind of love, but there was nothing else in life that he had more passion for than songs and music and making records, and I think we all know that. He loved writing songs, especially when he got something good. If it took him a lot of time, he would take a lot of time. He had this method he told me about where every component of the song has to be equally good. You can't have a great chorus and a weak verse, or a great verse, great chorus, and weak bridge. You know, that bridge is that short section the Beatles would call the middle 8, they only hear once. Each section has to be perfect, or they're not going to get on the album. He had his A songs and what he considered his B songs, those ones that were close, but not close enough, not for Tom. As I said, he didn't settle. He didn't take anything lightly. He seemed like a really easygoing guy, too, but he wasn't. You know, he told me that his daughter, I think it was Kim, told him that she thought it was so funny. You know, Dad, everyone thinks you're like this mellow, easygoing guy, and you are so not that guy. But, you know, in person, he was such a likable and personable guy and down to earth that it was easy to think he was that way, but he worried a lot. You know, those songs about worry, they were about him. And he talked about that often. He said that was one thing, getting to be friends with people like George Harrison and Bob Dylan. If you've heard of them, also excellent songwriters, people quite famous. And he saw Dylan, he wasn't comfortable with people that treated him like a prophet or a god. He was a guy. And Tom realized that right away, that these people are human. And just because you're a rock star or you're famous the whole world over, you still have to go through all the human things. And he realized with Dylan right away, as long as he was real with Dylan really appreciated that. And it was the same with Tom, you know. Tom was a real guy, and he was nice to people. And if you were lucky enough to meet him, you would know that already. And as I've said, and it's so true if you haven't met him, but you know his songs, and you live inside them, and they've inspired you, you do know Tom, because that's really him. Where some people, you hear their songs, and they're distant from that person. They're contriving the song, they're putting on a pose. Tom didn't do that. Even if he'd be writing in character, which he often did, He said Rebels was written in character. It was written about that person in the South. It wasn't necessarily meant to be him, but anything a songwriter writes about, it's about them, those choices, those characters he writes about. Even the song he told me, You Don't Know How It Feels, which he wrote at the time of Wildflowers. Rick Rubin, his producer, said, you know, that's not a good song, Tom. It shouldn't even be on the album. As you know, it became a big hit. And Tom had great, you know, understanding and confidence in his songs, as he should. He's Tom Petty, and he had a genius and a knack and great talent for it, and great diligence in making his songs great. But he also listened to other people. Someone asked yesterday, was he collaborative with his band, or did he just dictate to them? He was so collaborative. He was always open to what anyone else would bring. Of course, he worked with great artists, great musicians. His band, some of the greatest musicians ever in rock and roll, one of the great rock and roll bands of all time, and his producers. You know, he worked with producers, generally, after the beginning, that he really respected. Jimmy Iovine, you know, made some great albums with him, but he was always complaining that Jimmy was more of an executive than a producer, and was always on the phone. So Tom famously, several times, would take his scissors and cut the phone cord. It's good you guys understand, there were cords on the phone. So it was a different world. And my understanding, he cut it several times. And I think Jimmy, that probably had an impact. I would think that he must get another phone, of course. Then he took over the entire music industry. But after that, people like Jeff Lynne, he said Jeff Lynne was one of the greatest musicians and greatest producers of his time. It's not my mom calling, is it?